But the theme park closing was certainly no barrier the family could not overcome in providing their children a vacation, or should I say, staycation, to remember. Take my dog Frankie here, for example, who had an eye infection and needed eye drops. If I didn't want to drive up to the clinic, I can do an online consultation right here from my phone using the app AirVet. The app connects you with a doctor who can then perform an exam right through the phone's camera.
So how is Frankie's eyes doing?
There really wasn't much else of a police presence until we got later into the Dubuque Street, kind of towards the interstate. Clearly protesters were seeing that they were in the distance, and that's when we kind of heard conversations about, hey, this is a phone number to write on your arm in case you get arrested. Clearly there was going to be some sort of interaction down Dubuque Street. After reaching out to the Department of Corrections, I was referred to this press release that was sent out this morning, which states that in cooperation with the Iowa Department of Public Health, they began implementing expanded testing here at the IMCC. Last year, in the months of March and April, they served just over 1,000 pounds of pet food. This year, in that same time frame, that number has grown to over 6,000 pounds. Tonight in Monticello was the culmination of the Phipps family vacation. Chantel, her husband Brad, and their 3 children were supposed to vacation to Disney World this week, but for obvious reasons that didn't happen. But the theme park closing was certainly no barrier the family could not overcome in providing their children a vacation, or should I say, staycation, to remember. Planning happened on the fly.
The kids were kind of sad because we've been planning this trip for over a year.
But the wide-reaching smiles of their children's faces made it all worth it.
That's the biggest thing. Like, that's what we did this for.
The Phipps family vacation was supposed to be in Florida. Instead, the Sunshine State vibe came to eastern Iowa. Like any trip, it started with the travel. Bags were packed, security lines were fortunately short, and the flight was smooth.
That was much easier than actually going to the airport. That was so much better.
On Friday, it was a day at the resort. A bike ride on the lookout for gators, ending with a night at the spa. The weekend kicked off with a trip to the Magic Kingdom, breakfast at Cinderella's royal table, then gathering autographs from their favorite characters.
Look at the character meet and greets.
Then it was time to pop on a few rides, even if it took a little improvisation.
You can feel the air.
Sunday started with breakfast at Chef Mickey's and ended with a trip to Epcot for rides and fireworks. Day 4, it was back to the resort for a movie and then back to Epcot for their world-famous fine dining restaurants. Tuesday, it was time to hit up another park.
They made it to Animal Kingdom!
Seeing all sorts of animals while on the Kilimanjaro Safari. Wednesday, Hollywood Studios, the 4th and final park, was reached. Lunch at Woody's Lunchbox, and then one final trip back to the beach. And like every trip to Disney, it ended with a parade. Instead of one on Main Street, this one ended on Pine Street in Monticello. Most everything else looked the same.
I mean, this is up there as my favorite as of right now. It was fun.
Hey, buddy.
Reporting from Walt Disney World, Monticello, Mike O'Brien, KCRG TV9 News.
And nearly every press conference about COVID-19, next to the speaker is an interpreter relaying the information in sign language.
However, the translation industry is also hurting like many other businesses here in eastern Iowa. KCRG TV9's Mike O'Brien shares how one company here is doing its best to get the message out across all languages.
My ID number is 821-96287. I'll be a Chinese interpreter today. How may I assist you?
In the north part of Cedar Rapids, just off Edgewood and Glass Road, Hands Up Communications is adapting to a new reality.
Every time a new business closes, it's a new door closing to the opportunity to provide communication access through interpreting.
As schools and businesses close down, Hands Up loses its primary source of revenue, which resulted in massive layoffs of translators. Some forms of government are now relying on the internet to spread their message, and some have outsourced translation to larger companies or free services such as Google Translate.
Human language is very dynamic, it's very complex, and given different contexts, different situations, a machine is definitely going to goof some things up that could cause huge issues.
Even on the Iowa Department of Public Health website, the translation resources are limited. In the hopes of stopping the spread of misinformation in non-English speaking communities, Hands Up created its own site.
The communities in large who may not use English as their first language aren't receiving any of any or little to no information about the COVID crisis.
And that also applies to the deaf, hard of hearing, and the blind communities.
With deaf-blind, they can't see or they can't hear, and that information goes through physical contact, a touch. It's required to be done in person.
Hands Up hopes to return to their prior levels of employment once this crisis is over. But in the meantime, they stress that we cannot forget about marginalized communities, especially in Iowa's rural areas.
They're still there. They're still out there. We need to remember them, and we need to ensure to support the local businesses, because that's what we're doing. Our community. That's what makes Iowa home.
In Cedar Rapids, Mike O'Brien, KCRG TV9 News.
The Iowa Medical and Classification Center in Coralville is over capacity by 230 inmates as of today. This morning, the Department of Corrections said that facility has 10 additional positive tests of COVID-19.
And that's causing concern over how the virus could be spreading among those who work or live in Iowa's prisons. KCRG TV9's Mike O'Brien reports.
The Iowa Medical and Classification Center serves as a reception center for all men entering correctional facilities.
We have been shipping people all over the state and taking people in from all over the state.
In the latest round of testing, 10 more inmates tested positive. 3 staff members and 2 inmates had already tested positive previously. Dan Homan, president of the union that represents correctional officers, says workers don't have the right equipment.
We have no PPE in the prison, or very little PPE. We don't have appropriate personal protective equipment inside the prisons.
Homan believes IMCC's warden and the Iowa Department of Corrections are not doing enough to stop the spread of coronavirus within Iowa's prisons. He says he spoke with Department Director Beth Skinner on Tuesday.
I virtually begged her to shut down the Department of Corrections for 2 weeks, to test every inmate inside the Department of Corrections, to test the staff that work inside the Department of Corrections, not just the prisons.
After reaching out to the Department of Corrections, I was referred to this press release that was sent out this morning, which states that in cooperation with the Iowa Department of Public Health, they began implementing expanded testing here at the IMCC.
I think this should have been done 2 weeks ago.
While saying more has to be done, Homan says this is a step in the right direction.
Let's find out what is really going on inside our prisons, because we don't want to have happened to Iowa what happened in Ohio.
More than 4,000 inmates in Ohio got sick during a massive outbreak, and Homan is lobbying for more action to be taken for both the inmates and COs who are inside these prisons.
The people that we're talking about that go to work in these prisons have no choice. They got to go to work. So shut the prison down, test everybody. I hope that's where the director eventually gets to.
In Coralville, Mike O'Brien, KCRG TV9.